will tell you to get the latest iPhone 17, and it's definitely a sales hit. But despite the iPhone 16 Pro not being the newest model on the shelf, it skips out on some of the major shortcomings the 17 has. And that's the part people simply do not mention. I'm Olive, your host here at Versus.com, and let me tell you why the iPhone 17 might not be as great as it seems. Both of these phones look and feel almost identical, with the only visual differences being the cameras, which by the way revealed some pretty interesting results in our testing that we will show you in a minute. But going back to the design, both iPhones have the exact same footprint, though it's the materials where things already start to split. See, the 16 Pro comes with a more premium titanium frame featuring this slightly polished finish, while the 17 comes in standard matte aluminium. However, because of that, the 17 is noticeably lighter, coming in at just 6.1 ounces. Protection though is identical on both, with an IP68 rating, meaning no dust or rain is getting inside either of these. So build-wise, the 16 Pro is technically the more premium device here, but when it comes to the displays, things get weird. Both displays are the exact same 6.3 inches and both are LTPO OLED with a 120Hz refresh rate. However, they're not completely identical, and that becomes obvious the second you actually start using them. For example, in our brightness test, despite both reaching the same numbers for typical brightness, the iPhone 17 screen got significantly brighter for peak brightness, which might come in handy for the coming summer days. Another difference is that Apple put an anti-reflective coating on the 17. That means you get way fewer reflections when you're watching content. Plus, you're also getting a tougher version of Apple's ceramic shield. Where things stay exactly the same though is at this distracting Face ID island. Rumor says that might shrink with the iPhone 18, but we'll see about that. You can pause the video right here for all the display specs. Okay, so the display is clearly better on the iPhone 17, and it feels wild to even say it, given Apple always gave their base models super outdated panels. But don't think that Apple got generous everywhere, because when it comes to cameras, they are still cheaping out. Apple will tell you that both of these have 48 megapixel main cameras, and it is true, but the one in the 17 has a far smaller sensor. However, we gotta give props to them because photos from both devices look exactly the same. Only the 17 has a slightly warmer tone in some cases. Where things are literally identical is on the ultra-wide cameras, because the base iPhone adopted the 48 megapixel camera from the Pro models. And as you'd expect, photos are super similar with either phone. But the main issue is that Apple still thinks that you don't deserve a telephoto lens if you buy the base model. And that's a really questionable choice, given both Samsung and Google give you dedicated telephoto cameras on their base flagships. The 16 Pro hands you a 12 megapixel telephoto lens with 5 times optical zoom, and as you can see, it does make a massive difference. This also plays a huge role when shooting portraits, allowing you to create more professional looking shots on the iPhone 16 Pro. But what about video? Well, just like with photos, there aren't any massive differences to point out. Though, if you're a content creator, the 16 Pro can film at up to 4K at 120 FPS, whereas the 17 tops out at a maximum of 60 FPS. On top of that, you have ProRes log on the 16 Pro, so you can really fine-tune your footage in post. Now, cinematic video is present on both, and while you can still film at 4K, the frame rate only goes to 30 FPS on either. As for ultra-wide video, the footage looks pretty much identical once again, and this time around the maximum format on either device tops out at 4K 60 FPS. But before we show you how one of these absolutely destroys the other in terms of performance, let's briefly talk about the front cameras, because Apple put a brand new sensor on this base model. This 18 megapixel camera features a square sensor which lets you shoot vertical or horizontal selfies without even having to rotate the phone. Although the traditional 12 megapixel camera on the 16 Pro is not bad, that extra practicality does earn the 17 extra points. However, when it comes to video, you can see the framing on the 17 is slightly tighter, whereas the 16 Pro captures a bit more of what's around you. That said, both front cameras still cap out at 4K 60 FPS. So now let's test out the audio on both of these devices. We'll start off over here with the brand new iPhone 17. What do you guys think? How do I sound? Then moving on to the 16 Pro. Does it sound better or worse than the 17? There's quite a lot of traffic and a busy street over there. How
how's it handling it? Let's talk about it.
So you can still hear a fair amount of background noise on both, so that's definitely an area Apple needs to keep working on. So for us, even though this new front camera on the 17 is really cool, we would still pick the complete camera system of the 16 Pro any day of the week. I mean, it just gives you way more flexibility, whether you're shooting photos, portraits, or even video. That said, it is also completely obvious to us which one of these we would pick in terms of raw performance.
3, yeah!
The iPhone 17 being a newer model comes with a newer chipset. However, the RAM is exactly the same on both of these devices. Looking at the specs, you can see the 16 Pro has a lower base storage option available, but it counters that with much faster USB transfer speeds. But so you can see how these two actually stack up, we put them through some real-world testing, starting with gaming. First, we launched Grid Legends in graphics mode, and the very first thing we noticed is that you can run this title at up to 40 FPS on the iPhone 17, though that performance did translate into slightly higher temperatures. In Wuthering Waves with the graphics all maxed out, both topped out at 60 FPS, but the 17 was more stable in terms of frame rate, whereas this time around the 16 Pro got considerably hotter. Moving on to creator apps, in Lightroom, the 16 Pro finished exporting a batch of 99 photos a full 45 seconds quicker than the 17 and its newer chip. However, when we exported a 1-minute 4K video at 30 FPS in CapCut, the roles completely reversed and the 17 grabbed an 8-second advantage over the Pro model. But now let us show you how these performed in benchmarks. In Geekbench 6, for example, we got extremely similar results for single-core performance, but the multi-core numbers came out slightly higher for the 17. In 3D Mark's Wildlife Extreme stress test, once again we got very close results, with the 17 achieving a higher best loop score, but dropping down to the exact same level as the 16 Pro for the lowest loop. Finally, in Antutu, there was a slightly wider gap between these two, but altogether both performed incredibly well. So despite both phones coming incredibly close, we would still pick the iPhone 17 over the 16 Pro. And don't get us wrong, most of you won't even notice the difference on a day-to-day basis. But when you look at our real-world tests, it's clear that the 17 can sustain heavy loads better, plus it gets more attention from developers. Though other than the price tag, which we have to seriously discuss, the battery life deserves your attention because sometimes high power comes with some serious drawbacks. So despite both phones having the exact same footprint, the 17 does pack a slightly larger battery. We don't have any official wired charging speeds from Apple, but for wireless charging, they quote 25 watts for both devices. So here's how our drain test goes. We calibrated all screens to 500 nits, turned off all battery-saving features, and ran our 9-app loop, which includes social media scrolling, 4K video recording, web browsing, navigation, gaming, video and music streaming, plus video calling. And surprise, surprise, despite both delivering great endurance, the 16 Pro was the very first one to reach Valhalla, while the 17 held out for an extra 53 minutes, tapping out at just over 11 hours. To bring them back to life, we plugged them both into a 100-watt charger, and we waited. And once again, the iPhone 17 beat out the 16 Pro, hitting a full charge in 1 hour and 14 minutes, while the 16 Pro took an extra 23 minutes. So as you can see, the iPhone 17 pushes the envelope. Better performance doesn't translate into worse battery life or slower charging speeds. That said, the 16 Pro wasn't necessarily putting up bad numbers either. But are there any major differences when it comes to using either phone on the daily? I mean, both have the latest iOS versions and are slated for around 7 years of software support. And to be completely fair, you won't really notice any kind of day-to-day difference with either phone, given both have the same action button, the same camera control button, the same Siri with ChatGPT integration, the same visual search, the same personalization features. I think you get the picture. From the top of our heads, the only major features that you'll be missing with the iPhone 17 are those ProRAW and ProRes formats for photos and videos available on the 16 Pro, though you do get 1 extra year of software support on the 17. In the end, if you've had an iPhone before, you'll feel pretty much right at home here. But now, before we drop that price bomb on you, you've got to listen to these speakers because they are good. So you get great speakers on either of these, which is awesome because even though you'll be paying significantly less for one of these, you'll still be getting an identical audio experience. So Apple definitely supercharged the iPhone 17 by packing it with a ton of features previously reserved for the Pro models, plus an updated chipset and a battery that beats the 16 Pro. And you want to know what the best part is? It costs exactly the same as the base iPhone 16 did at launch, coming in at $799, so it is indeed as great as it seems. But what about the 16 Pro? Well, Apple will sell you a certified refurbished 128GB model for $759, but Amazon will sell you one for just $699, which makes the iPhone 16 Pro the better deal if you prioritize that telephoto lens, titanium build, plus highly comparable performance. And hey, you can use that saved $100 to buy 37 cans of Monster Energy. However, you've got to keep in mind that if you need 256GB of storage to match the 17, the 16 Pro climbs up to $849, and in that scenario, the newer iPhone 17 is definitely the clever pick. If you want to see if the iPhone 17 is still a better deal compared to the older base models, make sure to check out our video right here. I'll see you there in a second. Also, in case you want exclusive access to videos and perks, then go ahead and press that join button. Here's a very special shout out to our latest Ultra members, Karsik, Demir, Jason, Patrick, and SPR. Oh, and before you go and pre-order Grand Theft Auto 6, don't forget to give us a big thumbs up and hit subscribe if you enjoyed this video because we're always testing the latest tech to help you make the best choice. We'll see you in our next video, and until then, take care.